Now that you know the mindset you need to adopt in order to become a strategic advisor within your organization, let's look at the foundation for your comm strategy. I'm going to take you through how you need to be thinking about putting together your comm strategy and the important elements that you should not do without. Please don't create a comm strategy without these elements. Don't rush into tactics. Anyway, I'm talking too much. Let's go into this course and you can see the foundations of building and creating your communication strategy. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about the foundation for your communication strategy. These are the things that you absolutely need to bear in mind in order to make sure that your communication strategy is effective and that it helps you to achieve whatever it is that your organization has set out to achieve, either for the year, for the quarter, or whatever time frame or period. Okay, so let us start off with a scenario. So let's imagine your boss calls you and he says to you that the organization has lost significant market share. Or if you're working with a nonprofit, maybe you've lost 70% of your donors, and your boss wants you to develop and implement a communication strategy that will help regain some of this lost market share or donors. How should you approach this as a strategic communicator, bearing in mind some of the things that I shared in the first video? Now, the starting point is always to be clear about what your organization wants to achieve. And in this case, it is to increase market share. Your communication strategy then has to be tailored towards achieving this result. Anything you do, whether it's an online campaign, whether it is, some stakeholder engagement activity, if at the end of the day, it does not lead to an increase in market share or an increase in donors, your boss, that organization, your board, as far as they're concerned, comms has not hit the mark, or comms has not added value, as they usually do say. So before you run off, you mobilize the team, you develop those great ideas, you need to pause and you need to determine some things first. You need to ask questions. I'm going to repeat this a number of times. You have to ask questions. You can't make assumptions. A strategic communicator does not make assumptions. Remember what we said in the first video about data and insight. You need to do some research. You also need to be able to speak to the target audience or users of the product or service, or those who engage with the organization. And then finally, you need to set the right objectives. You need to do all of this before you now think, what's our strategy? What's our approach? Or what are the tactics that we need? These are the things that you need to do, because these are the things that form the foundation of your comm strategy. Now, let's go back to our scenario about increasing market share or increasing the number of donors. The questions that you will need to ask per brief or whatever it is that your senior leaders or CEO want really depends on the specific scenario. But this is a guide and I will apply it to the scenario that we're already using. Now, if someone comes to me and says we lost market share, my first question is, why did you lose market share? If you study businesses, if you read about businesses, and can I please advise you that try and expand your mind in terms of business knowledge. And if you don't work with a corporate organization, expand your mind to how non-profit organizations work. And you can say to me, oh, Adedoyin, business is too technical, That's fine. You can read autobiographies. I love reading autobiographies of business people, not just even business leaders, any leader across any industry. I'm now currently reading about Bob Iger, who was the CEO. I don't know if he's still the CEO of Disney. Watching his course on masterclass, just really learning how business people think. It will do you a lot of good. And if you work in the nonprofit sector, it is still the same thing. You must understand how they think. You must understand how nonprofit operates, how they stay, I don't want to use the word profitable, but how they stay sustainable, because they need some sort of income to be able to sustain that mission and the activities that they want to do. But that's an aside. So coming back to this scenario about market share, increasing donors, I want to know why. Why are we losing market share? Why did we lose 70 or 75% of our donors? Because if I don't know why, I cannot come up with a strategy. I cannot come up with a channel. Is it that, our donors felt like we're not doing enough? Is it that they have this perception that, we're just spending the money anyhow? They cannot see practically what we're using the donations for? Or is it that there is an economic crisis and people are now cutting down on non-essentials? That means, should we then focus on institutional donors instead of individual donors? Thinking about the donors, I'm going to even say this 75% drop, was it a drop in institutional donors? So let's say we had a combination of institutional donors and individual donors, maybe family offices to donate to us. I would segment them and say, okay, this reduction, is it a general reduction, or we saw a reduction of money coming in from the family offices? Maybe we had 3 family offices that, make up 60% of our income, and they just decided they weren't going to give us money. Does that mean we now have to increase our individual donors or increase our institutional donors? Can you see how the answer to these questions will significantly change the kind of strategy that you will use? If it's that we need to go back and nurture the relationship with the family offices, the approach is going to be different than if you say, okay, we want to raise up our profile so that more individual donors give to this organization. Very different. Same thing with the market share. Did a competitor come with a better product? Is this that a better product came to the market, they have better customer service, and the price was more friendly? It's going to be very different than if, for example, our product is still great, but just maybe the competitor came up with aggressive marketing, but we have great products. Imagine if our product was not as great. That's not a communication problem. That's a product problem. So we need to go back to the product and say, we need to improve this product so that it at least matches or exceeds what the competitor has on ground, and then we'll communicate. Imagine you don't solve the product problem. You create a communication strategy based on your existing product that is inferior to what this new competition has brought. You're not going to get your market share back. So I hope that you can see the linkages, and I would still do a video on data and how this really helps you to refine your strategy. But I just want you to know that you need to ask questions. What is the problem or gap here? Why does this problem exist? You need to speak to people. And that's why you can't create a strategy and you haven't spoken to people. You're not speaking to your CEO. You're not speaking to other people in other departments, people on ground, depending on what your organization is like or what you're trying to tackle or solve. You're not speaking to external audiences or stakeholders. You need to be able to speak to people. What does my organization want to achieve? We want to become number one. This new organization or this competitor, has beaten us to number one. So, and there's a difference still on this market share example. If it's that we lost market share to a new entrant, it's different from if we lost market share to someone that was at number 4 and just came up to be number 1. What did they do differently? Why did they knock us off? Where did we miss it? So you have to do this. No, it's not post-mortem, but you have to go to the granular details. And that's why I say to you that you need to understand how an organization operates and how your industry operates so that you know the indices and the factors that impact on certain problems and issues that may arise. Right? And then, is this a problem that communications can contribute towards solving, or are there external factors? So the other example I said, the competitor came with a more superior product. The product team, first of all, or the marketing team, we need to refine our products. We need to change something about our offering. And then we as communications people then will communicate that. If it was like, oh, there's a perception problem, so our CEO just went out on a spree to just be saying the wrong things, that's a perception problem that we can deal with, right? So you need to be able to know, is this just a communications problem? If it's that, oh, our product is great, everything is good about it, but our customer service are just dropping the ball. If nothing changes with the customer service team, there's little or nothing that you can do as the comms team or the comms person. actually the best thing you'll be able to do is to suggest that the customer service problem be fixed. But what you can then do as a strategic communicator is to see how you can help to solve that problem. So maybe they bring in a trainer, but you can help in creating a manual, a process flow that the customer service team can follow when they're engaging with external customers, when people call the phone, when they're responding to people on the website or whatever it is. But they must be able to solve the underlying problem. So don't go and take on a task that really isn't dependent on just comms to solve the problem. And then when it doesn't work, it looks like comms didn't do anything. Yeah, comms didn't do anything because there were so many other factors. And that's why, again, you need to be thinking strategically. And finally, you need to be able to ask yourself, what will success look like at the end of the day? How would we be able to say that we've been able to successfully achieve our organization's goals? How would we be able to say we've increased market share? There are indices that can help you to track increase in market share or growth. Now, you may say to me, oh, but how can we be sure that, the comms activity we did directly tied into that? That's where your strategic cap comes in. What are the different elements? What constitutes a market share? What are the things that lead to a growth in market share? When you know the individual elements, you can then say, okay, what can we do to grow this element? If this element grows, it's going to have an impact on market share. If element B grows, it's going to have an impact in market share. So you can then track the metrics for element A and element B, and then say, this is the percentage we contributed to market share. Same thing with the donors as well, because for example, comms team in a non-profit organization, you may not be responsible for fundraising, but you may do things that impact on fundraising, impact on how much comes in, or impact on how much goodwill with the donors increases or is boosted or refreshed or whatever it is. But really, really define what success looks like at the end of the day. And please, can I say, this should not just be you defining what success looks like. So you may think that, oh, this is successful, and your CEO is like, no. So it really, again, that alignment with the organizational goals, you can't do without it. Now, the next thing that you will need before you run off to create your strategy and think of all the great tactics that you can use is to do your research. Look, research is so important. Even in the scenario that we're talking about with regards to market share, you will need to do research. You need to do research on, okay, so who has the highest market share? What is the terrain like? You need to do a lot of research, and information gathering is an important element of what we do. It helps to fine-tune our strategies. It helps us to understand what kind of tactics we need. It helps us to give direction in terms of how we should set our objectives and what objectives we should set. So through your research, you'll gain an understanding of the internal and external factors that would increase the likelihood of success or failure. If you don't do this thorough research, like the example before, you can implement a very, very great plan that ideally should deliver a result, but because there were other factors that you didn't bear in mind, you wouldn't get the results. And that's why you really need to do your research. So carry out an objective assessment of your communication and business environment and your position within it. So going back to the market share scenario, maybe the competitor, they're communicating better. Maybe they communicate in a way that resonates better with their target audience. Maybe you can't know all of these things if you don't research, right? You need to understand the business environment. You need to understand what the communication problem is and the potential root causes. See, this is where value is articulated. This is where your strategic advisor cap really, really needs to come on. And so you break your research into internal and external analysis. I have a video here on YouTube that talks you through the comms planning cycle, and I explain these two aspects. So you can go into that video for more detailed explanation. But you typically want to do an internal SWOT analysis. So this organization, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are the opportunities? What are the threats? It's very, very important because you can see an opportunity that you can leverage on to help the organization to achieve its goals. And you can see a threat that if this threat is not tackled or dealt with, is going to negatively impact the work that we're doing. You can also do a comms audit. I also have a video and another course on communications audit, so I'm not going to go into detail with that. But what I would say is that a communications audit helps you to do an overarching assessment of your communication thus far. Has it been effective? Has it worked? You're able to get feedback from your stakeholders. You're able to get feedback from those internal and external on what's working and what's not working, what's their perception, what do they say about your organization. I always recommend every organization or every comms team to do a comms audit. What is the corporate culture? Assess what is our culture like. Because if, for example, you're saying that you want to attract Gen Z, but your internal corporate culture is still very rigid, it's still very bureaucratic, then there are going to be problems, right? So doing this research, it helps you flag things that might be issues and things that will be opportunities and things that you can build or capitalize on. You must speak with your senior executives, get a better understanding of why are we here, what are their goals, what are their priorities, and then departmental interviews. See, you need to be able to bring on board the relevant departments because they are collaborators in your execution. And we'll talk more about this in the execution video, because sometimes we think we're working in a silo. Your comm strategy actually impacts multiple people within the organization. So if you're not speaking to them, if you're not getting them on board at the beginning, you just find an unnecessary bottleneck down the line. And then going to the external analysis, you're looking at industry trends, what is happening within the industry. Now, don't just look at the trends of now. You may want to also track what has happened before. How did we get here? What are the trends that led us here? Is this an industry that things, operates, pretty much the same, minimal disruption, or is this an industry, e.g. tech, that there is always disruption? You need to know. Pestle analysis, you're looking at the political environment, you're looking at the economic environment, the social environment, technological and legal. Why this is also important for you is because it helps you to flag things. It helps you to see things that may impact on the work that you're doing. So imagine if the political environment, there's instability, there's government regulation that can easily come up and affect the work that you're doing. That would also impact negatively on what your organization wants to achieve. So you must be able to do that analysis. Communication benchmarking, who are the people at the forefront of communicating within this organization? When you do within our industry, I beg your pardon, when you do your communications audits, you will be able to see, oh, this is a leader in terms of comms. They communicate very well. Their key messages are clear. Their followers and their audience, they're engaged on the different channels. Who are you benchmarking against? Because you must be able to benchmark, who do we want to surpass, who do we want to meet, and then get insights from your stakeholders. You have to speak to your stakeholders. And talking about speaking to your stakeholders, your target audience. So you have, if you look at a typical stakeholder mapping, right, you have your internal stakeholders, you have your external stakeholders, and then you have your target audience. So the people who directly purchase or use maybe your product, your service, or if you're a nonprofit organization, the people that your organization serves in terms of the communities and all. You must speak to them. You need to get their thoughts about your organization. What are their thoughts about the products, about the service? What challenges do they have with your organization, your product or your service? See, I found that when I speak to target audience in the campaigns that I've done and strategies I've created, a lot of useful insight that sometimes even the organization is not even aware of. And you're like, oh, wow, we didn't think of this. We didn't know this. What are their needs or concerns? Right now, as I said before, there's economic crunch across several countries, several regions. How is that impacting on your customers or your target audience? And what are their habits, their decision-making patterns? Who influences them? Who is a key person in the value chain of their decision-making that maybe you also need to target, but you are not thinking about? So you really need to speak to them. And there are many ways you can do this. Even if you don't have a large budget, you can do a social media poll. You can do a very, very interesting interactive survey. There are many tools now to be able to do that. There's Typeform. I really like Typeform. You can use a typical Survey Monkey. You can use Google Forms, but just get some sort of information. And then my favorite, okay, I think I have a lot of favorites in this work that we do, setting the right objective. This is where your comm strategy will sink or swim. Now, I have a video on YouTube and a course on setting objectives that goes deep into details, but I wanted to highlight something for the purpose of this course. Now, usually when we set objectives, they're either not measurable. Okay, we want to increase brand awareness. By how many percent? By when? Not smart at all, right? And by smart, I mean specific, measurable. Yeah, that's what I mean when I say smart. Sometimes you see an objective that it doesn't even align with what the organization wants to achieve, or the objective is measuring outputs, or it's only measuring the things that, visitors on the website. That's very great. It's good to show that we have traffic on the website, but what does that translate to? Remember, being a strategic communicator, you want to communicate results that has a direct impact on what the organization wants to achieve. So if you're only measuring outputs, how then are you able to show impact? And so these are the three objectives that you really should focus on when you're setting objectives. The outputs, which we all commonly measure, that's the volume with regards to the media vehicle or communication channel. For example, the number of people that attend the press events, number of placements of a press release, downloads of a resource on a website visits, things like that. Those are your outputs. And those are great because you must actually track them. The problem is stopping there because they don't really say much, especially in the context of the organization. What says much is when we then move over to outcomes. And that's when you're looking at the degree to which your communication activity affects awareness, understanding, preference, and behavior. So we put this report on the website. We had 1,000 downloads. By virtue of that 1,000 download, there was 50% increase in understanding of XYZ subject matter. Those are the things that you really need to be able to track. How has awareness increased or decreased, or maybe it didn't even change at all? And then another thing is, and I will talk about this in the measurement video, it helps you to know the benchmark. So if you say you want to increase awareness, how would you know that awareness has been increased if you don't measure the current awareness level? So you can see how just being strategic just helps you to be more efficient and effective. So what is the percentage change in attitude or understanding? And then the next set of results, business results or impact objective. Business results are for corporate organizations and impact is for non-profit. So you're looking at the degree to which your comms PR activities makes a direct contribution towards your organization's objective. So by virtue of this, there was an increase in maybe a 50% increase in preference that led to more people then buying our products. At the end of the day, we converted 20%, and with 20%, if the total amount that came in is 1 million, so 20% of that was as a result of our communication activity, or we saved X amount of money by virtue of these activities that we did. That is how you're communicating business results. That's how you're communicating impact. So, for example, a percentage increase in the number of donors or amount of donation if you're working in a non-profit organization. So please focus on output objective, outcome objectives, and business results or impact objectives. And please, can I say something else here? Because it's something I see in many comm strategies. So many objectives. I'm like, why are you trying to achieve all of this in one thing? You have to think about your capacity to be able to do those things. And that's why your objectives need to be smart. So if I can just go back to the objective setting templates, think about it like this: improve what, by how much, among who, within when, or by what time frame. So improve what? Improve brand awareness by how much? By 50%. Amongst who? Amongst the millennial women or upwardly mobile women within 12 months or by the end of December 2023. So this is the example. Increase the number of positive media reviews of X organization amongst travel influencers by 20% by the end of May. You can measure this. So what are we measuring? Positive media reviews from travel influencers. So it's not even positive media reviews on from maybe finance influencers or fashion influencers. We are focused on travel influencers because that's what is directly relevant to the organization and its goals by 20%. So we will track what is the level of reviews that we have now, right? And then by the end of May, we will be tracking. Now, this is me going ahead into the measurement course, but if by let's say March, by the end of March, I'm seeing that we are just at 5%. It means that we need to change something so that we'll meet this our 20% objective. But again, we'll talk more about that in our measurement and evaluation video. But the final thing to say here is that your objectives, please, they need to be smart. They need to be very specific. You need to be specific about what it is that you want to achieve. It needs to be measurable. How will you know that this thing has been achieved? It needs to be achievable. You have to be reasonable. Don't say we want to get 100,000 new donors in 3 months. Do you have the capacity and capability to do it, given the human and financial resources that you have? And that ties into being realistic. How are we going to implement this objective? Is this realistic based on, what we have on ground? And then it has to be time bound. What is the time frame? You can't just have a perpetual objective, because again, when you are evaluating, you won't even know when something is going into a red flag, or you need to step in, or you need to change tactic, if there is no time frame in which you're going to be measuring. So I just put some more examples here. Increase awareness of sustainability initiative by 35% amongst general public in the operating countries in 12 months. Be positioned among the 3 first positions of the Global Sustainability Competitiveness Index by the end of 2023. Increase corporate ranking on XY Best Company to Work by 3 places within 1 year. Clearly, this is an organization that wants to be a thought leader in sustainability. So these goals, can you see how specific they are? They are smart, they're specific, they're measurable. That is the kind of objectives you need to be setting in. And sometimes if it's not something you're used to, it will take work, but it is doable. You can write smart objectives and it will make a difference, trust me, to your comms plan. Okay, now some final words. Never, and I mean a big emphasis on never rush off to create a strategy without asking the right questions and accessing the right data. This is so important. It helps you in your decision-making process. It helps you determine what particular strategy to use, what target audience to focus on, what tactics are going to work best for you, what you will need to measure. So please don't just say, oh, my CEO wants us to do this is the strategy. Take some time to ask the right questions. Take some time to access the right data. Understand why this problem is occurring, what brought the organization to this problem, what are the obstacles, what are the barriers. With data, there's a lot more you can do. But if you don't get data, you run off and create a strategy, then at the end of the day, you deliver, you've put in the work, but then it doesn't deliver on the expected results. That's not really, really great. And similar to that, don't jump into your tactics without considering your overall strategy and what you want to achieve. Don't just say, okay, so yes, we want to reach Gen Z, and automatically you just decide, okay, TikTok is it. How are you really, really sure for the subject matter that you have? Yes, Gen Zs, they lean towards TikTok, but maybe YouTube may just be the better platform for you to use. But if you don't think about these things strategically, if you don't speak to your audience, if you don't do your research and you make these assumptions, it may not land well. Maybe that particular content on TikTok is not going to work, right? Or it will work. You will get the views, you will get the content going viral, but it will not convert, depending again on what your objective is. So you want to think about what exactly do we want to achieve? And this tactic that we are using, how does it help us to achieve this thing that we want to achieve? Never, you can see there's a lot of never in this final point. Never create a comm strategy without measurable objectives. Please don't do it. If you've been doing it before, from this point, make it your commitment. Every time you want to create a strategy and you've not created or written out your objective, I hope you hear my voice saying, where are your objectives? Please never create a comm strategy without measurable objectives. Very, very important, because that's where you're going to articulate impact. That's where you're going to be able to show alignment with what the organization wants to achieve. And that's where you're going to know that this thing that we're doing is actually making a difference. And finally, always be clear on what success looks like. Not just assuming, speaking to management, speaking to your CEOs, speaking to your bosses, and being clear on this is what they're measurement, or this is what they believe success will look like, and this is how it will be measured. There's no point saying, oh, this is the success metric, and then you're not able to say whether you've been successful or not. You must be able to know how that will be measured. So thank you for watching. In the next video, I'm going to be talking to you about understanding your audience. Bye.